The door swung open with a soft chime, the bustling noise of the busy restaurant momentarily fading as Karoline Leavitt stepped inside. She'd heard about the place, a renowned spot for those seeking a taste of the finest dishes in town. But the moment she walked in, something felt off. The air grew heavy, as if the room had taken a collective breath, holding its judgment. Without a word, the host glanced at her, then turned his head slightly, as if weighing his options. A brief pause. "Sorry, we don't serve your kind here," he said, his tone flat, but the words hit like a slap. The restaurant's usual hum quieted as patrons exchanged confused glances. Karoline stood frozen for a moment, shocked by the blatant rejection. But what happened next wasn't what anyone expected. A voice from the back of the restaurant cut through the silence. Cater, the owner, walked towards her with a calm, measured pace. Everyone watched, wondering what he would say. What would he do in a moment like this, where an injustice had just unfolded before their eyes? Cater's gaze met Karoline's, his eyes sharp but understanding. Without hesitation, he turned to the host, his voice now firm. "If she doesn't belong here, neither do I." The room was silent, the tension thick. No one had ever seen the owner take such a stand. And what followed would change everything for everyone in that room. Forever. Cater's words hung in the air like a challenge. And for a moment, no one moved. The host, taken aback, opened his mouth to protest. But Cater didn't give him the chance. He stepped forward, his presence commanding. As he turned to the rest of the room, "You all come here for good food and a welcoming atmosphere," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "But it's more than just the dishes that make this place special. It's about respect. It's about kindness. And above all, it's about making sure no one feels out of place, no matter who they are." The room was still. Some patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked at their plates, pretending not to notice. But a few of them, those who had been quietly observing the exchange, exchanged glances. They knew something was shifting in the atmosphere. Something beyond just a mere incident at the door. Karoline, still in shock, met Cater's eyes. There was no anger in his gaze. No bitterness, only a quiet, steadfast determination. Her heart started to race. She had prepared for rejection, had braced herself for a cold reception. But instead, this man, this stranger, was offering her a chance. "I've been in this business long enough to know," Cater continued, addressing the host now, "that when people are made to feel unwelcome, it reflects poorly on all of us. And I won't stand for it. Not here, not now." The host stood motionless for a moment, his face reddening. He seemed torn between his own pride and Cater's unwavering conviction. And then, slowly, he nodded. It was a small gesture, but enough to let the tension in the room begin to ease. Cater turned back to Karoline, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "I'm sorry you had to experience that," he said, "but you're welcome here. You've got a seat with us anytime." Before Karoline could respond, he motioned toward one of the empty tables near the window. As she walked toward it, she couldn't help but notice the eyes following her, some curious, others wary, but none filled with the judgment that had been there just moments ago. But the story wasn't over. As she sat down, a young waitress walked over, a nervous smile on her face. She set a glass of water on the table, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm sorry for what happened. I hope you feel comfortable here." Karoline nodded, offering a small smile in return. "I do now, thank you." As she took a deep breath and looked around, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about being served food. This was about standing up. About making choices that challenge the status quo and reaffirm the simple truth that every person deserves dignity and respect. The door swung open again, and a couple entered the restaurant, unaware of the tension that had just passed. The host looked up at them and, with a shift in his demeanor, smiled warmly. "Welcome," he said, his voice now kind. "Please, follow me." The change was subtle, but undeniable. The ripple effect had begun. It wasn't just about one person standing up for another. It was about a moment that reshaped the way this small restaurant would operate from that point forward. And as Karoline sat there, sipping her water and watching the scene unfold, she realized that sometimes, the most unexpected acts of kindness have the power to change hearts. And that was something worth celebrating. As Karoline settled into her seat, the room started to breathe again. Conversations, once interrupted, slowly began to resume. though the undercurrent of what had just happened lingered. It wasn't just the words that had changed the atmosphere, it was the quiet courage it took to stand up for what was right. The weight of the moment was felt by everyone in the room. Cater, having made his point, walked toward the back of the restaurant without a glance at the host. But before he disappeared behind the kitchen door, he turned around one last time, addressing the room as a whole. "I run a business here, but my responsibility goes beyond just food," he said, his voice ringing out clearly for everyone to hear. "It's about doing what's right, even when it's difficult. We all have a role in making sure this place feels like home to anyone who walks through that door." The words hung in the air, settling into the minds of the patrons. For many, it was the first time they'd heard anyone speak so openly about inclusivity, kindness, and standing up for people who were being treated unfairly. Some nodded in silent agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably, but no one could deny the impact of what they had just witnessed. Karoline watched as Cater disappeared into the kitchen, her heart still racing, but now filled with something else, hope. It was a small thing, what had happened, but it felt significant. She hadn't just been allowed to stay. She'd been given something more, an invitation to be seen, to be heard, and to be treated with dignity. That was a rare gift. For the first time since she entered the restaurant, she felt like she belonged. The waitress returned to her table a few minutes later, this time with a bowl of soup and a small, handwritten note tucked under the spoon. "It's on the house." The note read, "Thanks for standing up for what's right, Cater." Karoline's fingers brushed over the note as she smiled. She wasn't just grateful for the meal, but for the unspoken message behind it, the courage to challenge a system that had long been built on exclusion and division. And even more, she realized the importance of small acts of defiance in the face of injustice. As she lifted the spoon to her lips, she heard footsteps approaching. It was the host, the same one who had denied her service earlier. He was walking cautiously toward her, his expression now different. Gone was the rigid, defensive attitude. In its place was something softer, guilt, perhaps, or maybe something like realization. "Hey," he began, his voice low. I wanted to apologize. What happened earlier, it was wrong." Karoline didn't say anything at first. She studied him, the sincerity in his eyes undeniable. "Thank you for apologizing," she said quietly, choosing her words carefully. "It means more than you might think." He nodded, standing awkwardly for a moment before adding, "I don't know what's gotten into me lately, things haven't been great around here. And I guess I let the pressure get to me." His voice trailed off. Karoline smiled softly, trying to soften the moment. "We all make mistakes," she said, "but it's what we do after that counts." He nodded again. Then, after a brief pause, said, "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. You have my word." The air between them had shifted completely. Where there had been hostility and discomfort, there was now understanding and, perhaps, even a hint of camaraderie. As Karoline took another sip of her soup, she realized that this wasn't just a victory for her. It was a turning point for the restaurant, too. Change wasn't instantaneous, but it had begun. It had taken one small, courageous act to spark a shift in perspective, to ignite a conversation that hadn't been there before. And as she sat there, surrounded by strangers who had been silently watching, Karoline understood something deeply important. Sometimes, standing your ground doesn't just change the moment, it changes people. It opens the door to conversation, to growth, and to possibilities that might otherwise be lost. Before she finished her meal, the door to the restaurant opened again. A couple entered, looking around uncertainly as the host greeted them with an unfamiliar warmth. "Welcome," he said, a genuine smile crossing his face. "Right this way." And just like that, the restaurant felt different, the air lighter, the atmosphere brighter. It wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction. As Karoline stood to leave, she glanced toward the kitchen door one last time. She saw Cater standing there, watching the exchange with quiet approval. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was a shared understanding between them. It was a small victory. Yes, but it was one that carried weight. A reminder that sometimes, standing up for what's right, no matter how uncomfortable, can make all the difference. As Karoline made her way to the door, a feeling of quiet satisfaction settled in her chest. She hadn't just received an apology or a meal. She had witnessed a small but important shift in the culture of this place. Something that could have lasting effects beyond just that evening. But just as she was about to step outside, the sound of footsteps behind her made her pause. She turned around to see Kater walking toward her, his expression thoughtful but resolute. "Karoline," he said, his voice carrying a weight of meaning. "Before you go, there's something I want to tell you." She stopped, her hand resting on the door handle. "Sure, Kater, what's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, then spoke with a tone of quiet urgency. "You don't know how much this moment means, not just for you, but for everyone in this room. What happened tonight isn't just a story about one person being treated unfairly. It's about everyone here recognizing that we all have a part to play in creating a community that's worth being a part of." She nodded slowly, her heart stirred by his words. "I think I understand," she replied. Kater continued, his gaze unwavering. "People like you, who speak up, who push back against wrongs, even small ones, remind us of the kind of world we want to live in. And even though this restaurant is just a small part of that, I believe it can be a place where everyone feels like they matter, no matter who they are or where they come from." Karoline felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected to hear such a powerful message in a place like this, a small restaurant tucked away in the heart of a community. But that's exactly what she had witnessed tonight, the beginning of something bigger than just a meal. Something that transcended politics, biases, and assumptions. "Thank you, Kater," she said softly, "for what you did, for what you've created here." He smiled, though it was a smile tinged with both pride and something else. Something almost reflective. "Thank you for being part of it," he said, and for a moment, they both stood there, in that quiet space between them, sharing the weight of what had transpired. Just before Karoline walked out the door, Kater added, "If you ever find yourself here again, I'll make sure it's a meal you'll never forget." She gave him a small smile. "I think it already is." And as she stepped out into the cool evening air, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something larger. Something more meaningful than just one person's experience. The restaurant, once a place of quiet normalcy, had become a stage for a small but significant act of change. And Karoline, along with everyone else in the room that night, would carry the impact of that shift with them. Long after the doors had closed, as she walked down the street, the stars above her flickering like distant promises, she realized that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected moments hold the power to ignite something bigger. It wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who dared to look beyond the surface and say, "This isn't right," and then did something to change it. And in the end, that was what made the difference. As Karoline walked away from the restaurant, the cool night air filled her lungs, but there was a warmth in her chest that wouldn't go away. She had come there for a meal, expecting just another day, another moment in time where she would be one of many. But instead, she had witnessed, and played a part in, something more profound. The streets were quieter now, and as she made her way toward her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her friends or family. But it wasn't a text, it was a news notification. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the headline. Karoline Leavitt denied service at local restaurant. Owner's stand leaves community divided. She tapped the notification, curious, and scrolled through the article. The words weren't harsh, but there was an undercurrent of surprise. It detailed what had happened at the restaurant that night, the initial denial of service, the confrontation, and Kater's bold decision to stand with her. As she read, a strange sense of disbelief settled in her stomach. The story was out there now. But more than that, it was creating a ripple effect. People were talking. The community was questioning their assumptions. And the restaurant was in the spotlight. For better or for worse. And then, at the end of the article, one sentence stood out. While the restaurant's future remains uncertain, many are hopeful that this incident marks the beginning of change in the way we treat others in our community. She closed the phone, the glow of the screen fading as she slipped it back into her pocket. A part of her had feared this kind of attention. But the other part, maybe the stronger part, felt a surge of something else. Something like hope. The next day, the restaurant was packed, not with the usual crowd, but with reporters, curious locals, and a handful of people who had heard the story and wanted to see for themselves what kind of place it was now. Karoline wasn't there, but she had been getting messages from people all day long, messages of support. Messages from strangers who were moved by the story, who shared their own experiences of being denied or rejected, just like she had been. And, As the day passed, one thing became clear. Cater's decision wasn't just a turning point for the restaurant. It was a turning point for the community. People who had lived side by side for years, never truly engaging with one another, started to reach out. Conversations began. Some were awkward, others filled with discomfort, but they were happening. It wasn't easy. Change never is, but the seeds had been planted. By the end of the week, the restaurant had become something of a symbol, not just of defiance, but of the possibility of reconciliation and understanding. People came for the food, of course, but also for something deeper, a chance to witness the first steps toward a new kind of togetherness. And as for Karoline, she couldn't help but feel that, despite all the uncertainty, something had been set into motion. What she had experienced wasn't just about being treated fairly, it was about a shared responsibility to make things right. To not let silence define us, but to speak up, even when it's hard. A few weeks later, Karoline returned to the restaurant. This time, it wasn't because she was trying to prove something or make a statement, it was because she wanted to be part of the change. She sat at a table near the window, sipping her coffee, watching the steady hum of the restaurant around her. The door opened, and Kater appeared from the kitchen, looking worn but satisfied. He paused when he saw her, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "You're back," he said, as if nothing had changed. Karoline smiled back, nodding. "I am. I think we're all back." In a way. He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the bustling room. "The conversations, they're happening. The walls are coming down. Little by little." Kater nodded, his expression softening. "It's not perfect, but it's a start, and sometimes, that's all you need." And as the two of them stood there, sharing a moment of quiet acknowledgement, Karoline realized that the story wasn't just hers. It was everyone's, the community's, the restaurants. The change they had all been waiting for was underway. Not because of one person or one act, but because people were finally willing to listen, to understand, and to see each other for who they truly were. As she finished her coffee and stood up to leave, she looked around the room, meeting the eyes of several patrons who had come in since her last visit. They smiled at her, and she smiled back. It wasn't perfect, but it was a new beginning. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Your support means the world to us, and we hope this story left you feeling inspired. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to drop a comment below. Thanks again for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.